And so a broadening of the scope of HSA eligible things, maybe you make certain like healthy food things HSA eligible. Maybe you
So
make
cool.
gyms HSA eligible. Maybe you make yoga studios HSA eligible. Maybe you make like national parks passes HSA eligible. Like all these things contribute to
Are there
health
any
in pretty
efforts to
direct
do any
ways.
of that? Because those were all pretty good ideas.
There
I hadn't
there
thought of
are
them.
genuinely efforts to do those things. Yes.
Hmm, it's a good idea. Team, welcome back to another episode of Mops and Mo's. And for the first time in 2 years, 2 years we've been doing this. How long have we been doing this?
What is this for the first time? I don't know. What's
We're getting political. We're getting political.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're gonna get fired.
That's a good point. Well, no, maybe,
I doubt it.
probably not. We're getting political, team.
To be clear, we're gonna try and at least a little bit to keep it not partisan, because there's a difference between political and partisan, right? Partisan means like party based. Political just means we're talking about issues in politics. It's going to be impossible to keep this entirely separate from politics. It is inherently political, but we are going to try and keep it as nonpartisan as possible.
Yes. So for people that have obviously seen the title of this episode already, I'm assuming you have if you've clicked on it. MAHA. Our thoughts on MAHA. MAHA? MAHA.
In my head, it's Maha. I've
MAHA?
heard people say like Meha. I don't
MAHA.
know.
Nah. Anyway,
Isn't I need to look it up. I believe Meha is a word in Hawaiian.
it
Yeah,
sounds
to
Hawaiian.
relieve the body of pain. So
Hey, not so far off though.
I don't know if that was intentional or not.
There's
Maybe
no
they
way that
figured that
was
out after the
intentional.
fact,
No way.
but it's
So, so
convenient.
we'll go with MAHA. MAHA, of course, standing for Make America Healthy Again, which for the astute listener will know that this is effectively Robert Kennedy's health conscious platform is kind of, I think, a 20,000 foot way of explaining it. And we'll spend the next who knows how long diving deeper. Do you have any opening thoughts?
I mean, my only opening thought is I think we should probably do our best to define what it is
Please.
before we start breaking down sub issues. So I spent a little time on the website. Let me check what it is. This will be in the notes, maha.vote. Now that I think about it, it's probably Maha in Hawaiian too, because Mahalo is Hawaiian, so it's got to be Maha. Yeah.
Maha. Yeah. Maha. Any Hawaiian listeners out there, let us know.
Anyway, few elements, and these are some of this came directly from the website. Some of this came from a few videos they made, primarily just RFK Jr. talking to the camera, explaining what it is, that kind of stuff. So from their site, it says that MAHA is for health conscious, independent minded voters. It says that the platform consists of four primary lines of effort: one, combating the chronic disease epidemic; two, advocating for regenerative agriculture; three, preserving natural habitats; and four, dismantling corporate corruption and agency capture.
What's interesting, I don't know if you found this, but in researching this episode, Make America Healthy Again is actually the title of a book that was
Really?
that was
I didn't even
published
run
in
into the book.
is published in 2020 by Nicole Safier. She's a doctor. The subtitle is How Bad Behavior and Big Government Caused a $1 trillion Crisis. And so interestingly, here's this sort of description. Americans are notoriously unhealthy. We eat too much, drink too much, and sit too much. Gets into cardiovascular disease stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very, very similar to some of these platforms. I didn't dig any
Hmm.
deeper than that, but I'm curious if she's part of this, if they just hijacked her thing, if she's getting royalty. Like,
I wonder.
yeah, I know. So, um, but yes, it's a sort of my perception of Maha is that it's this kind of health industry, pharmaceutical, sort of anti-establishment agenda, if you will, that RFK Jr. is championing, and it seems to be actually relatively bipartisan. I don't know how you found
I
ish.
disagree.
Do you?
Um, I
Maybe
think
it started that way. Maybe it
I think they
started.
claim to be bipartisan And I will agree that where all of my hope is in this is that it creates opportunities for bipartisan action or nonpartisan, if you want to call it that. Um, I think there are things that we can agree on, regardless of political party, in here somewhere. Part of the problem is the the MAHA organization, the MAHA PAC, because it is a political action committee,
The Mahabros.
was explicitly like for the RFK campaign.
Hmm.
And then when RFK aligned with Trump, the PAC was explicitly campaigning for Trump to win. So it like we're not pretending that the PAC itself or the platform itself or the organization, if you want to call it that, is nonpartisan because it is partisan. Um, that's just what it is. And before I lose the thread on it, looked up Nicole Safier a little bit.
That was
Um,
quick.
definitely did indeed name it. She's active on Twitter and stuff like that. It does not seem like she's part of the organization. It does seem like she's excited about the fact that it's gaining momentum and things like
Oh,
that.
probably because it correlates to book sales by confused people.
Yeah, but she retweeted RFK saying, "I feel like I should get an honorary hat." Just saying, but it doesn't seem like she's actually embedded with it.
That's insane. What are the odds?
I don't know. Maybe we'll get her on the
Um,
podcast one day. We'll see.
that's not a bad idea. Yes. So on sort of the partisan thing, I think my take on that was just that when you see this from the first blush, so to speak, there are a lot of policy points, stuff that we'll get into here that you would be hard pressed to disagree with, whether, I mean, regardless of where you sit politically. I mean, we'll stuff around healthcare prices, stuff around insurance, stuff around regenerative soil, like things that you would like, I think everybody would agree with. Um, and I think for to understand maybe the perspective of the whole platform, you sort of have to be in the mindset of there being large scale institutions that are running these different programs and that there's some sort of malicious, maybe not malicious, but there's some sort of intent involved. And so then you get this kind of anti-establishment approach to the healthcare industry. Um, that was my lens in approaching this, and that was why some of it was attractive. And then obviously you have the inevitable talking points around like some things RFK has said in the past with vaccines causing autism and all these other different things. And so we'll unpack a lot of that. But um, what you're about to get into, dear listener, is a conversation between Alex and I on the Make America Healthy Again platform. Um, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I think what we're about to do is like essentially dive into several of the many hot topics that exist within the
Hmm.
broader Make America Healthy Again universe. What I will say, I'm going to express support for some of these, and I'm going to express doubt about some of these, concerns about others, things like that. My overarching thing is, regardless of where you come from politically, I think there is potential here for some good stuff on a few of these. I think it has driven conversation about policies oriented at improving health, and I think that's cool. But broadly, I remain pretty skeptical about this until I see any actual change happen
Hmm.
for two primary reasons. One, most of this has to do with profit incentives, and it's really hard to change profit incentives. And two, the the previous Trump administration did kind of the opposite of a lot of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's hard to
Yeah.
believe that we're going to see like a complete 180 on that many of these
I
topics.
I saw so it was interesting because I was listening to a political commentator the other day talking about some of Trump's strategies with some of these things, whether he's consciously making these personnel decisions or not, but effectively what it boiled down to is like he has a tendency to put people in the room with him who make him look like the sane one. And that was more from like I think they were talking about global policy, much broader topics than just
Yeah.
what RFK is doing. But when you think about it through that lens, it's like because he has Bobby's going to handle whatever. There's a real chance or a real point to be made that like there's a chance he's just been appointing this guy to be a legitimate crazy person with some of this stuff so that maybe some of the things that they do end up passing look sane. I don't know. I'm just happy that there's conversations being had around some of these
Yeah,
issues that we're going to
I
get
think we can
into.
agree to that.
Yeah. So,
Which one do we want to start with?
well, we've got 5 pages of notes for
This
people
is like
who,
the longest notes document we've had.
yeah,
I spent like an hour or two a day for
there's
like
a
a week
lot.
just like
There's a lot
reading.
here. Let's start
Yeah,
with fluoride. Start with fluoride. It's first on the list. Start with fluoride.
let's do it. So
Hopefully, people know what fluoride is.
when I see the top line talking points on fluoride, I I hear so like the RFK camp will say we need to get fluoride out of the drinking water, and the knee-jerk reaction will cite like federal leadership statements saying fluoride is one of the great public health achievements of the last century. Fluoride is absolutely good, reduces cavities, all the stuff you're saying is made up. And the answer is there's absolutely nuance here. When you go to experts on this issue, both sides, the side that thinks that fluoride in the water is great and the side that thinks that fluoride in the water is criminal, both of them acknowledge that there is not enough research for it to be conclusive. There's research that points in directions, but they all agree that we need more research on the topic. Another bottom line reminder, the dose makes the poison. There is an amount of fluoride that is beneficial, and there is too high an amount, and there is too low an amount, right? It's not about being pro or anti fluoride. It's about finding fluoride delivery mechanisms that help make sure that people are getting the appropriate dose because there are lots of different ways you can get it. Kind of the biggest part of all this is that when you live in a world where not a ton of people are getting regular and consistent dental care and fluoridated toothpaste and all these kinds of things, then fluoride in drinking water makes a ton of sense, right? You're making up for them not getting it from those other vectors. If people start getting more fluoride from vectors other than drinking water, you might need to rethink how much fluoride or if fluoride goes in the drinking water. So there's nuance. Like we say this all the time. Part of what we do on this podcast is address the nuance. Like it's easy to post a hot take on one side or the other, but the answer is somewhere in between.
Well, and there's a fascinating case study here, which I was looking at years ago, totally unrelated to this podcast. But my favorite country in the world, Scotland, they don't add fluoride to their public drinking water. And in fact, fluoride in public drinking water in like the UK at large is still kind of it's not to the level that it is here. And what's interesting is that in Scotland, in order to have fluoride added to your drinking water, to your public drinking water, the local NHS health board, which is like their,
Mm-hmm.
medical board, they have to request, but they must show, and I'm reading this kind of verbatim, they must first consult with the public and demonstrate that a majority of people support their proposal. So there's a lot of like anti-fluoride fear mongering in the UK. And what's funny is that what's the biggest stereotype about British people?
Bad
Shitty
teeth.
teeth. And I kind of pursued that when I lived over there. I was like, why do they actually all have bad teeth? There's an argument to be made that a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's this aversion to fluoride. It's getting better, but it's kind of a it's not cool. It is cool, but it's not cool. But you can very easily just you can show like effectively tooth decay rates in places that have elected to include fluoride versus places that haven't. I would say I'm
But
probably,
even that gets more complicated too, right?
of
Because I read
course,
a
yeah,
bunch of the literature, and a lot of the places that haven't fluoridated their drinking water have seen similar improvements in dental health, but from other vectors, right? Just from like
right.
better dental hygiene,
Better dental
more
hygiene.
access to
Yep.
care
Hmm.
across the EU, and especially in the UK. There are dentists in the public schools, like it's
Yeah,
built in.
they're good at it. They're good at healthcare over there.
So maybe you don't need to fluoridate the drinking water if your kids are
But
getting
like you're not,
like
it's not,
really consistent. Yeah.
it doesn't hurt. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like dose makes the poison. Sure, you can jack fluoride up like wicked high, but it seems like such low hanging fruit.
To defend the other side of the issue, high levels of fluoride exposure have been linked with lowered IQ in children. That's the thing. Like
Is
too much
that
fluoride is bad.
correlation though? I mean, like,
Like,
how do you isolate that to just fluoride?
I mean, this is why they say they need more studies on it because the studies are not conclusive one way or the other. But I think like even people who say we should fluoridate the water will acknowledge that too much fluoride causes problems.
Well, yeah, people who support air conditioning probably think too much air conditioning would turn your house into a freezer.
That's not a good
I think that's pretty
corollary.
good. There's probably people listening now. They're
You
like,
said at the top of this that the
great
dose
point.
makes the poison.
I
Like, of
know.
course there is healthy dosing
I'm
and
just
unhealthy
playing
dosing.
devil's advocate.
And there are like easy case studies, right? Because there are countries that don't have natural fluoride and don't fluoridate their water. There are countries that don't have natural fluoride and do fluoridate their water. And there are countries that have naturally occurring fluoride in their water. Like 28 countries around the world, the water is already fluoridated just naturally because of the rock.
Mhm.
So like you you can
It
do a pretty
just,
good job of checking people's exposure levels.
no, I know. It feels like one of those things that it's very hard to isolate that variable because you have so many correlative factors when it comes to dental health.
So here's my takeaway because I don't want to spend too much of the episode on
Yeah, of
fluoride because I
course.
don't even know how much our audience cares about
They
it.
may not.
But seems like an easy answer is we probably need more research on it. And so the government's
I
got to
think
fund research.
most of these are going to come down to,
We are gonna get there. And especially when we get to the nutrition stuff, we're gonna talk
oh
about the
yeah,
state of federal research funding.
boom,
I think that's the top line recommendation here is
more research.
as much as each side wants to say it's like a black and white issue, it's kind of a gray issue. You got to figure out how much fluoride people are being exposed to by vectors other than drinking water, and then establish the appropriate amount of fluoride in drinking water to get them to the appropriate level.
Which is funny because I mean, already here we are at point number one, and there's an incredible amount of nuance. When you read most of this MAHA stuff or you listen to him talk about this MAHA stuff,
Yeah.
it just sounds like he's going to step in the door and like start flipping switches. Like, hey, boom, no more floor. It's like, oh, well, that. So I'm curious how much of this, like we said, I mean, how much of this actually ends up
Yeah.
happening?
And there's also a huge difference between getting elected and governing.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
hot takes get you elected. Once you're
Then you run
governing, you got
into
to deal with nuance.
bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Seed oils. This is a fun one. I will admit, I have not like super read into the whole seed oil thing just because I have no issues with olive oil and I think that's fine.
So
I know it's a hot topic.
this one we probably honestly should do a whole episode on. And I'm going to
We
say
could.
this for several of the topics.
We could and we should.
The one that triggers me is that the message right now that you hear in some spaces is that like seed oil is killing you and you should go back to like butter and tallow.
And like
Um,
inflammation.
yeah, which is objectively false, right? Tons of studies on seed oils not linked to inflammation. In fact, like replacing butter and tallow with seed oils is healthier, documented in large scale studies, randomized controlled trials.
Really?
Like, yeah, seed oils are pretty good for you
I
used in
mean,
moderation.
but how does something out healthy butter?
Yeah, just say that out loud. Like, I know we come from a space and like
Not
Drew's probably
just,
listened to too many bro podcasts and
no,
stuff
just
about like if I
butter is
put
like as
butter in my
natural as like,
coffee, I'm gonna be
oh, no, I'm not going
bulletproof.
that far. No, no.
Like, listen,
Those people are out of control.
like
I just mean from like a healthy cooking. It's like, oh, butter. I mean, like, tallow is an interesting one. Tallow is animal fat, pretty much, for people who don't know. But yeah, I tend to get sort of the Instagram level seed oil controversy that hinges around a lot of
and that's the
inflammation.
problem.
No, I know, but I think for most people, that's sort of what they take on.
Seed oils are not uniquely inflammatory.
Sure, there's a lot of it though
And
tied
in some
to,
cases may in fact reduce inflammation.
and there's a lot of the dialogue that I see that's just tied to the larger conversation around processed foods and like seed oils are like super
Well,
processed and blah blah
I
blah
mean,
blah
we're
blah.
getting there.
I
I
know.
think that's farther down our list. We just skipped to the processed food conversation because I think you actually make a
Sure.
valid point, right? Processed food is not that useful an umbrella category
It's a
because there's
catch-all
a
phrase.
yeah, it's a catch-all phrase and like there are healthier and less healthy foods under the umbrella of processed and
Processed.
ultra processed. Like for example, we did a whole episode on creatine where we were generally pretty positive on it. If you're taking a creatine supplement, that is absolutely an ultra processed food. Like no question. That's
Yes.
ultra processed. There's a difference, like a soda is also ultra processed and a Twinkie is also ultra processed, but they are not nutritionally interchangeable with like creatine or protein powder. But yes, you do see a lot of seed oils in highly processed and ultra processed
Hmm.
foods. It doesn't mean the seed oil part is the bad part.
I think when most people close their eyes and you say picture processed foods, they're picturing like packaged
Yeah.
grocery store. Because I'm with you. Like inevitably, whey protein powder is processed. Like you have to process stuff to get to that
Hmm.
point. So
And like most whole wheat bread you find in a grocery store is it's going to meet the academic criteria for ultra processed because it probably has something in it stabilizing it or texture emulsifier or
shelf
something like that.
stabilization. We need to do a processed food podcast.
Again, we said this would
I
happen at the
know we're gonna say
beginning,
this a lot.
but like the processed and ultra processed food conversation probably deserves a whole
MREs,
episode.
ultra processed.
I do want to point out, and this might hurt some feelings. I don't know. Uh, People are happy to demonize ultra processed foods. Perhaps the most dangerous to your health ultra processed foods, right behind soda, because like sugar sweetened soda is probably the most dangerous one in terms of health consequences and how much is consumed and things like that. But
Yeah.
behind soda, it's probably hot dogs and chicken nuggets
You're saying are the most processed?
are the most harmful to health.
Oh, harmful to health. Hot dogs, you think?
Yeah, there's like you should look at the research, man. It's known carcinogen.
Oh, I get
Not
my
like
hot dogs from a
not possible
farm.
carcinogen, but known carcinogen.
Yeah. Hot dogs as a concept are a little bit sketchy.
Like heavily processed meats is
Well,
like kind of the
it's
worst of the
just
worst
the
behind soda.
leftover. It's like the leftover shit that gets tossed aside when they're making the other meats, and then they're just like, "What do we do with this? I don't know. Make a hot dog, and then sell it at baseball games. They're so good, though."
That's the problem. It's like the things people like are the things that are the
Well,
biggest problem.
I say that. This is gonna make me sound like a total hippie. Probably not the first time on this episode, but I started buying the one of actually the farm where I buy my raw milk. They also sell, amongst other things, they sell hot dogs that they get from their pigs, and they're not. I mean, they're not processed. They taste so good.
I'm sure they do. I will admit the same guy we got that raw milk from once upon a time. I also got sausage from him, and it was incredible.
So
Like
good.
store bought will never be the same.
No, I don't think I'll go back to a store bought hot dog.
And
Although
man, the duck eggs too, those were amazing.
dollar hot dog night at a minor league baseball game is as close to Nirvana, I think, as you can get. What are we talking about? Seed oils?
We got to get back on track, man. Should we do food dyes?
Yeah, because you're pretty stubborn on this one. I'm kind
Well,
of anti-food dye.
what's my stubborn belief?
Well, I know we've gone back and forth in the past about, in certain countries you're not allowed to use artificial dye. Basically, my thing, and you shoot holes in this, but in America, broad brush, petroleum-based food dyes are fine. And you talk about known carcinogens. I'm not saying petroleum is necessarily carcinogen, but it's not good for you. And I would, if given the choice of what to put in my mouth, I would rather the food be dyed naturally, i.e., I mean, beet juice, whatever, people, all kinds of different fruit-based dyes.
Mhm.
That's probably where I sit. I know there's nuance to the discussion, and we'll get into it of like what's outlawed in other countries versus here, and yada yada yada. But for me, it boils down to like if you put those two in front of me, I'm probably going to take the one that's not petroleum based. I can tell by the look on your face, you're ready to go.
I don't disagree with you. My points are just different than that.
Fair.
My overarching thought is most of the foods they point to as examples of like containing all these scary food dyes, the food dye is not the most unhealthy part of
Oh,
that
for
food,
sure, for
right?
sure, for
Like
sure.
like if you're eating Fruit Loops and you think they would be
Yeah.
healthy if not for the food dye, I've
Yes, I'm
got
with you.
bad news for you.
They won't. Well, they'll be healthier.
Well, I mean this comes back to the like processed and ultra processed food issue. Like yes, a lot of foods that have dyes in them are bad for you in a lot of ways.
But it's not the dye.
I think the food dye might be the smallest way they are bad for you, if it's even bad for you.
It's like smoking an all-natural cigarette versus like
Yeah.
I don't know what kinds of cigarettes there are, but hopefully that
Well,
Makes
don't go too
sense.
deep down the rabbit hole of additives they put in cigarettes, man,
Well,
because like
there you go. So like,
tar, like
are organic cigarettes a thing? I don't know, but like that's kind of the point you're making, right? Is
that's part of my issue here.
that doesn't to me like eliminate a case to be made for
It
getting rid
doesn't.
of fake food dyes.
It doesn't.
So carry on.
But we're
I
gonna
got
keep
you,
going with some other concerns because
please.
I am not against digging deeper on the health consequences of various dyes. I think there's a conversation there. But what everybody always says is, and like it even I think it said it on the MAHA website, but like RFK has called for outlawing food dyes and additives that aren't allowed abroad. So every Instagram post will be like, "This is illegal in Europe," and it's just more complicated than that. One, every food dye has a different, it's like a letter and then a 3-digit number. It goes by a different name in Europe. So like the same chemical can have different names in different countries. So like you might not see it on the allowed list, but it's still there just under a different name. Second, there are a ton of food additives that are legal in Europe that are illegal in the US. And this brings me to a couple broader points that are not specific to food dyes, whatever. I mean, they're both kind of tied to capitalism, really. Everybody's been demonizing Kellogg's lately. Kellogg's doesn't put colors in their cereal to make you sick. Kellogg's puts colors in their cereal to sell more cereal, right? I think it was like 2 decades ago, Kellogg's went through this whole effort to remove a lot of the dyes from their foods. And people stopped buying as much. So they put it back in because they are a business. And the way publicly traded businesses work is their number one duty is to make money for their shareholders. So it's tough. And the even bigger one that's not necessarily capitalism related, but is just like government related, is how paternalistic a government do you want, right? Because a lot of these talking points are coming from the conservative side of the political spectrum, and conservatives typically want small government and less regulation. Yet MAHA is simultaneously calling for the deregulation of some things and the extremely strict regulation, if not outright banning of other things, often without any proportionality to the health impacts of those things. So it's very odd and contradictory to me. Like if we're I guarantee you, if we stacked up the effect sizes next to each other, raw milk has caused more harm than Red 40. But now we want to legalize raw milk and ban Red 40.
Raw milk's delicious. Red 40 is made from petroleum, and it's a known carcinogen, like hot dogs.
Red 40 is a known
Um,
carcinogen. I think it's on. I think it
or
may
it's a
possibly
possible.
be on the list.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
see.
like headed that way. It's funny because the food dye thing.
It's not as carcinogenic as hot dogs. I know that.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the red hot dogs. They probably have red 40 in them, and then you're just double dipping. They're probably so good though. Um, the story you always hear, or I came across a number of times looking into the food dye stuff, is the whole narrative about Kellogg's producing in the same factory the cereal for Canada and the United States, and just using different food. So they're in the United States making the quote unquote healthier version of the thing, and then just sending it to Canada. And I'm with you on like the conservative thing with the regulations, and I think for me it's just like as a country, hopefully this doesn't get too political, but like as a country, what are the numbers of like obesity now? Like what are we at? Like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4? Like it's out of control. And so you would think that you kind of have to do something, and banning something as obvious as like putting fake shit into our food seems like okay, I can get behind that. Like Democrat, Republican, whatever, food diet, like if you're telling me that the cereal is not going to be as bright, but it's going to be marginally healthier, probably a good move.
And for what it's worth, because like Drew has opened himself up to criticism with the petroleum-based thing and saying everything petroleum-based is unhealthy. Other things derived from petroleum. Aspirin comes from petroleum. Wax comes from petroleum.
Are you
Products you
eating a
find in
lot of
chewing
wax?
gum come from petroleum. Products you find in potato chips come from petroleum. I know it's like sounds scary to say, but
None of the
like
things you just said are healthy, though.
not explicitly unhealthy either. Like
Sure.
food safe wax is like derived from petroleum. There is wax in some of your foods.
which is weird to think about.
Sure.
Again, I'm like I prefer that if anything that anything that angles us more towards like whole natural foods, I'm probably gonna be for that.
Look, a lot of things that occur in nature kill you too.
Yeah, I mean, fucking sitting here, my ceiling could fall on me, sure.
Like cinnamon in high doses will kill you.
Everything in high
Absolutely
doses
will.
will kill you. That cinnamon challenge, we should do that one day.
Mm, I don't think that would be helpful.
Um,
Are we good on food
I
dyes?
think we're
I
good
don't
on
think that
food
one
dyes.
deserves a full episode, to be honest.
No, there's enough going on in the social media space. What is, well, I guess we probably don't want to give her handle out on Instagram, but the lady that's attacking Kellogg's. I know you don't like her very much.
We have a section in the notes at the end of this episode where we can talk about individual personalities. I'm
Save
mostly
it.
hoping we don't get there. I don't think that's even worth it. I
That's
don't think it's
fair.
helpful.
A quick social media search you will arrive at the lady who's attacking Kellogg's. Um, okay. Health savings accounts allowing the coverage of functional medicine doctors.
There's multiple pieces to this.
Of
I'm going to
course.
take the functional medicine doctors thing and put that aside for a second.
Okay.
I think a broadening of what HSAs can be used for is
You may
awesome.
want to
So
explain HSAs to people.
health savings account is pre-tax money that you set aside that can be spent on things for
Hmm.
big air quotes healthcare. And the
As
problem with
determined to
that,
be healthcare.
yeah, the problem with that is who determines what counts as
Exactly.
healthcare. And so a broadening of the scope of HSA eligible things, maybe you make certain like healthy food things HSA eligible. Maybe you
So
make
cool.
gyms HSA eligible. Maybe you make yoga studios HSA eligible. Maybe you make like national parks passes HSA eligible. Like all these things contribute to
Are there
health
any
in pretty
efforts to
direct
do any
ways.
of that? Because those were all pretty good ideas.
There
I didn't
there
follow them.
are genuinely efforts to do those things. Yes.
Hmm, it's a good idea.
Most notably gyms. The problem is it almost immediately, like everything else, gets corrupted by capitalism.
For sure.
And so like the knee jerk one is people should be able to spend HSA dollars on supplements. And supplements are poorly regulated. And so whether they're contributing to health or not is fuzzy. So
Who
I don't
put I could see a case being made for gym memberships.
know.
Supplements is like what? I don't know if I would go down that because you're
I
right.
mean,
That is a messy.
referring back to the list of main characters in the MAHA universe at the bottom of our notes sheet, there is another MAHA main character who is a big advocate and is running a company that exists to get statements of medical necessity for various not traditionally healthcare, but certainly
Hmm.
contributing to health.
Which we both liked, right?
The company,
Yeah.
generally, yes,
Creative
with the
solutions.
asterisk of he is also the guy pushing it
Weird
for
dude.
supplements.
Weird dude.
Because the company is like also bankrolled by some supplement companies, so he has to say that they're awesome.
Yes. But imagining a world where people could use HSA dollars to join a gym and or yoga studio, like you mentioned, I think
Mhm.
could be pretty cool. Do you want to have the functional medicine conversation?
The functional medicine conversation is another one that might be a whole episode, and I don't
Because
know that
I
we can
go to
bring
a
on.
functional medicine doctor. It's been great.
I think there are great elements of functional medicine. I think the general platform is awesome. I think there are a lot of charlatans in the functional
For
medicine space
sure.
trying to push unnecessary testing that they're not qualified to interpret on tons of people to make money.
Yes. For people who are unaware, functional medicine in a nutshell is, well, it bills itself as a more, here's a word for you, holistic approach to medicine. So, whereas historically you might go to the doctor and get prescribed some sort of medication,
Hmm.
and this is where a lot of people will inject narratives around big pharma and over
Hmm.
medicating and blah, okay, fine. A very biomedical sort of thing that we've talked about. Functional medicine, a little bit different in my experience, because like I said, I've been seeing a functional medicine doc for a while now, and like the first appointment is a very different experience than going to see the doctor. Immediately, there's questions about sort of your entire life,
Hmm.
childhood,
It's about root
uh,
cause stuff.
root
Yeah.
cause stuff. Yeah, life, a lot of conversation around the lifestyle, which I thought was super cool. Granted, I only exist at like the top level of this functional medicine thing. So for me, it's like appointment, blood work, conversation around different supplements or things that can improve blood work. rinse and repeat over and over and over. You can get into conversations around like hormone replacement stuff. Obviously, testosterone comes into the conversation. So it's like you said, a vast ocean at
Mhm.
this point.
And the
Uh,
problem is it can be really, really
it can
good.
be a
It's like,
lot of things, which
yeah,
is scary.
understanding the root causes of disease and how lifestyle modification can help address them is awesome. And everybody agrees
Hmm.
with that. And like, no issue.
But it's
Massive
unregulated.
panels of blood work that aren't indicated and have no symptoms associated with them aren't always helpful and do cost a lot of money. So
Mine's
there's
covered by
there's
insurance, which is great.
just as many. Just because it's covered by your insurance doesn't mean it's not
I
profitable.
totally, for sure,
Like
for
it
sure.
is,
I'm saying it's cheaper
and
for me.
like a lot of these companies even do it like direct to consumer, where like you get your own labs and interpret them yourself. And labs are complicated, and normative values range widely, and
Hmm.
what's acceptable and what's not, depending on comparisons to other like and like how recently you ate before you got the blood work done, or how recently you exercised before you got the blood work done. Like a million things can
Hmm.
contribute to it, and so using it as a sales tactic is a little iffy.
Like Peter T is a big, well, he's more like his thing's medicine 3.0, which is probably less functional, more traditional. But anyway, my sense with the functional medicine thing is that we're sort of at the cusp of what could
Hmm.
probably end up being a really interesting revolution in healthcare. And so the thought of being able to use something like an HSA to kind of bring this back to
Hmm.
MAHA, to be able to use that to allow people to at least have a choice in terms
Yeah.
of which direction they want to go, I think could be cool. Sure, there's risk,
Hmm.
but there's probably also risk in going the more traditional route too. I mean, look at the opioid epidemic.
Without sliding into a giant rabbit hole, it's also the conversation about the difference between like healthcare and sick care.
Ooh,
Like
I like that.
here in the US, we have a fantastic sick care system,
Hmm.
right? Where like we will address the disease, we will keep you alive, right? But we don't have a great system for pursuing actual health.
Because it's not, you can't make money off of it.
And that's part of the problem, and it's part of recalibrating incentives and things like that. And that's
Hmm.
why I am wholehearted because like essentially what allowing HSA dollars to be spent on some of these things would be is the government subsidizing in the form of a tax break healthy behaviors.
Healthy, yeah, exactly.
And I am on board for subsidizing healthy behaviors.
And it because HSAs are optional. Like you don't have
Hmm.
to. So
Yes.
there is an incentive in some sense to push people to create and or fund an HSA to
Hmm.
then pursue some of the. So
I think the only fuzziness is coming to a common consensus of what counts as like healthy
well,
or
I
like
could even see. I mean,
justifiable.
boil it. Just pick one, like the gym thing. Like I could see a world where like a YMCA counts, but a CrossFit gym doesn't because they get people like there's
And now
gonna
you've
have to
entered into the
be
politics of it, right?
exactly,
CrossFit would be furious about that if
exactly.
YMCA gets that benefit and they don't, right? Because that, and now you get into lawsuits and things, or an even like hairier one, right? Like, should we be able to spend HSA dollars on vegetables?
I would think that there should be a nutritional component to it. The line is not for me to decide
Yeah. See,
because
like,
that's a
right, like on the
whole.
surface, yes, that's awesome. But like, where do you draw the line?
Then you get into like the snap stuff.
Yeah, because there's like vegetable based supplements that may or may not work, or there's
Hmm.
like
Farmers market.
like microwave meals that have vegetables in them. Does that count? Like where do you draw the line? It gets really hard.
Here's what you do. Here's what you do. Because, and I'm making this up as I'm saying it, but I love a farmers market. Most farmers markets, if they're cash only, have some sort of system where you can go and basically purchase, sometimes it's like little wooden tokens or
Hmm.
whatever, fake currency. I could see a world where you could HSA dollars would be eligible to redeem at something like a farmer's market.
Who regulates who gets to sell at a farmer's market? There's pastries and like coffee shops at my farmer's market. Like those
Mine
aren't
has
particularly healthy.
delicious Patriot. Sure, but
Yeah, they're really good. I love them, but that's
is
not
that as
healthy.
bad as like the whole SNAP thing that like vectors you towards soda and like sugary processed foods?
No, but if I start like making craft soda, they would probably let me sell it at the farmer's market, and now I can take HSA dollars for soda.
But it's craft soda.
There
It's
probably is. There's definitely like sugary lemonade at my farmer's
oh,
market,
there's for
and
sure.
that's nutritionally nearly the same as soda.
Well, it's less processed. Like I said, making these policies up as I'm saying them, but
Yeah, I think we've spent enough time on the
We
HSA
both
thing.
agree that there's
Yeah,
definitely a lot of nuance there.
there is goodness to be found there. Somebody's gonna have a really hard job of figuring out where the line is.
Here's
That's
a fun one. Regenerative agriculture.
once Drew figures out how to say it, we can start talking about
Regenerative
it.
agriculture. There you go.
So, Drew, correct me if I'm wrong. You were the one who was trying to get us the guest to talk about regenerative agriculture, right?
We were trying to find, so for context for people, we've been trying to find somebody in the nutrition space that will just speak plainly about like a whole food sort of natural diet and
Well,
scaling that and blah 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 blah.
frankly,
Well,
I want to do an episode specifically on regenerative
well, no, and
agriculture too.
I say all that because when you pursue those types of conversations, the regenerative agriculture piece of it
Mhm.
is like they're hand in hand. So
So maybe somebody listening to this can help get me informed. I've read a little bit of the research and a little bit of the news and a little bit of the public statements on this topic, but I have not gone deep enough into it to know how seriously to take it and things like that. As I understand it, we are within a couple decades of a national scale topsoil nutrient crisis where
yes.
like a dust bowl type of scenario. And regenerative agriculture does seem to have the potential, done correctly, to one, solve that problem, and two, actually increase the overall output of our arable land. I don't know if that's completely true or not,
Yes.
but that's what I understand the situation to be.
That's this, I mean, depending on who you listen to, it's a few decades away or it's like next Wednesday.
Yeah.
There's some fear mongering, but my take on it and just kind of what I've seen, and granted, some of this is Michael Pollan talks quite a bit about this in some of his books, but just so people understand what's going on here. What has happened is that you have this sort of industrial scale monocropping situation where we're
Hmm.
producing like corn and soybeans. And in some states, like that's it. Like there is no biodiversity when it comes to agriculture. And so, with that, because it's not necessarily natural, you deplete the soil of all of these nutrients and all of this stuff. And the regenerative agriculture people will tell you how critical healthy soil is to
Hmm.
pretty much everything on the planet. I forget the name of the documentary. Maybe it's called Soil. I don't know, but
If it's a documentary, I probably don't believe it.
well, it makes a good case, and I'm with you on documentaries, but it makes a good case for this sort of soil argument. And I think this the scariest part of it is that it takes a really long time to regenerate good soil. And so we are able to deplete soil much faster than we're able to regenerate it. However, comma, if you use some of these more regenerative agriculture processes, i.e., not blasting the hell out of crops with different dangerous fertilizers and all this sort of stuff that is way beyond you and I's like area of expertise. But if you pursue some of these more regenerative processes, you actually create this lovely little circle of life scenario that healthy soil, healthier foods, more bioavailability of nutrients, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So some of it is a little bit like Shangri-La and happy, healthy, hippie farming type stuff. But it is really cool, and it is one of those things that you don't ever really think about. And then once you start thinking about it, it's like, oh shit, this is like a really big deal. I don't think people realize that like people from Idaho are probably going to kill me, but like entire states like Idaho are literally just corn.
I mean, I'm from Illinois and it is
Yeah,
just corn and
just
soy.
corn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then there's trickle down effects in terms of like the, commodity crops, government subsidies around crops, farming lifestyle, like all this sort of stuff that's probably, again, we'll hit more than once, but like worth its own podcast.
Yeah. So I think that's the bottom line on that one is both of us have a little bit of exposure to the regenerative. Oh, now
See,
I'm doing it too.
see? It's hard.
Uh-oh. We're gonna
Regenerative
need to change the
agriculture.
name.
You got to say it a
Um,
couple times before you really.
yeah. So both of us have some exposure to the regenerative agriculture space,
There you go.
but neither of us are experts, and we have not yet found the right expert to come on the podcast and teach us about it.
And the MAHA platform is pro regenerative agriculture, just to bring it back
Yes.
to MAHA. MAHA, MAHA.
I think it's like one of the stated, yeah, it's one of the top four
Hmm.
platform objectives. Yeah.
I could get behind that. I think of all the ones we've talked through, it is probably one of the ones that has the biggest,
It also has some huge hurdles.
for sure.
Regenerative agriculture is much more manpower intensive.
Hmm.
It would require a significant degree of restructuring of the food supply and people being willing to eat more diverse food sources.
And it's expensive.
It is expensive. There is, though, I have also seen that there's some significant potential with like AI optical recognition to automate some of what would need to be manual processes that might make it
Hmm.
cost effective. But that gets into the whole conversation of the environmental impacts of AI. We don't have time for that. But
Yeah.
it might make food a lot more expensive, and that's a problem.
Yes. Is it a problem or have we just totally desensitized ourselves to the actual cost of food?
Sure. And
Which
like
I'm
some of
dancing
those
around a
issues can be
rabbit hole.
solved with subsidies and yada yada. But like we aren't economists either, so
Sure. We're not. We're just lowly human performance
moving
professionals.
on.
Let's move on to Snap.
All right. You want me to start on this one?
Yeah, go for it. Well, yeah, explain what Snap is. It's food
Yeah,
stamps.
SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps. One important thing to know before we dive into this is that the vast majority of people who use SNAP, SNAP doesn't cover all of their food. That's part of the name. It's supplemental. It's in addition to.
Hmm.
So they also spend non-SNAP dollars on food. SNAP is only like $7 a day. It's not a ton of money. Um, so there's complexity there, but part of the MAHA platform is to regulate which foods are eligible for SNAP so that SNAP dollars can only be spent on nutritious food. Now, that brings us to a variety of problems. So like the classic example is that SNAP currently is allowed to be spent on soda, and a lot of it is spent on soda.
Which is insane.
I did get an email back from her, by the way, Drew. We're doing some sausage making here, but one of the researchers that I reached out to last week did email back saying she's interested in doing the podcast, but she's too slammed until the end of the term. So we got to recontact her early next year. But she did some interesting research on how soda companies time their advertising spend around when SNAP money is issued. So you're going to see more soda ads right after all the people on food stamps just got their food stamps. That's
That is
dark. That's not good.
diabolical.
Yeah, it's really bad.
That is like insane.
And I think I can agree with not allowing SNAP dollars to be spent on soda, but again, this comes into a really hard conversation of where do you draw the line? Because if you're trying to eat on $7 a day, you need really cheap, really calorie dense food. That tends to be your ultra processed food. It tends to be high sugar, high fat, high carb, tends to be hyper palatable. Like all the things we would look to label as unhealthy are calories per dollar the best thing you can choose if you're just trying to feed people on as few dollars as possible a day. Now, that's not the whole conversation because now we have way more obesity than we have starvation. So like people are consuming plenty of calories. The other problem that people classically point to is if you say you can't spend SNAP dollars on soda, they're going to say, okay, they're going to shuffle around what they spend SNAP versus non SNAP dollars on. And they're still going to buy the exact same amount of soda. They're just going to buy it with the money they were using anyway to supplement the SNAP dollars. It's complicated, but I would love to see something that incentivize, like, honestly, something like if you're buying vegetables with SNAP, they cost 10% less.
Oh,
Like, that'd be awesome.
you get a little oh snap discount.
Yeah, like an incentive to spend it in healthier places would be great. Like I don't know exactly what that structure looks like. Again, we need like
It's not a bad
a
idea, actually.
team of both like dietitians and
Your dollar
economists.
goes further the healthier you
Exactly.
go.
That'd be
Hmm,
fantastic. Again, I
look
am
at that.
completely on board with subsidizing healthier options. Like I will say that over and over and over again. I think the government has a vested interest in having a healthier population. I think the amount of money spent on subsidizing healthy options would save more than that on healthcare. It would
Healthcare.
improve military readiness. It would
Nobody
improve
makes
so
that
many things.
connection. Nobody makes that connection, though.
But I think
Like,
it's because healthcare is still dollars being spent and people making profits,
right.
right? So
But
like
that's like
saving
the
money on
one
healthcare is
thing.
against somebody like you understand like Concentrated benefits, distributed harms.
Yes,
That system will stay in place.
for sure.
Concentrated harms, distributed benefits. That system will be pressured to go away,
Hmm.
right? Because you have a motivated, like the people who are affected the most are going to take the most action and be the loudest outspoken about it, right? And so if like really concentrated benefits, now you have a really motivated population that's going to protect that system. We're not getting into a Luigi Mangiano conversation right now. Really concentrated
Dude,
harms, you're going to have a very motivated population that's trying to change that system.
you think he wrote that manifesto?
It's barely a manifesto, man. They keep calling it a manifesto. It's not really one.
He's a good looking dude. Um,
I've seen more pictures of Luigi in the last week than I've seen of
did you
any other
see
single human being.
it was either beanies or baseball hats, but the Luigi, like Mario and Luigi
I didn't
hat
see that. I did see a
sold through
natty
the
or
roof.
not. I saw a natty or not video because there's that picture of him looking jacked in Hawaii or whatever. We are
Hey
not turning
man,
this into that episode.
Luigi,
We
if you're
cannot
out
do
there
that.
listening, just shout out for better or for worse. I'm not sure. TBD. Um, yeah, Snap, man. This is way beyond my scope. I'd be very curious to have a conversation like this with a dietitian that's qualified to answer it. But you mentioned sort of like like calories per dollar. A lot of this calculus that I hear, at least in the political space, boils down to calories per dollar under this assumption that the more calories you can get per dollar, the better. For me, the question is like, I feel like I feel like we're at the point where we recognize not all calories are created equal,
No.
and shoving 1,000 calories of Twinkies down your throat because it's on the SNAP program is different than getting 200 calories from broccoli. I mean, that's
Yeah,
obviously an
and to be
extreme
fair,
example.
it's more about nutrient density and satiety
Right.
than it is about calories. I think we agree on that.
Well, so my
But at
question
the end
for
of the day, they still have to feed people as cheaply as possible.
right, but so is the pursuit of SNAP as it currently exists, are they pursuing the most nutritious array of foods? Or are they pursuing the most calorie dense
I mean,
foods?
this kind of brings us
Keeping
back.
keeping the lobbying and stuff out of it from the sodas.
Yeah, I mean, this brings us back to our Dr. Mozafarian episode and the advent
Hmm.
of nutrient enriched, shelf stable carbohydrates and grains and things like that. And
It's messy.
yeah, it's hard.
It's messy.
Go listen to that episode if you want to deep dive
I
on.
like your idea though about the more health. There's like a spectrum. The healthier
Yeah, but
you
like once
go,
again, that would get so political
it always
so
will. It
quickly
always will.
because that like so many markets are going to be affected by how much of a discount you get on their product.
Yeah.
Like people haven't been paying attention. Like everybody wants to demonize the USDA and the FDA and all these organizations that are part of this, but like the FDA has been trying to implement a standard for which foods can include the word healthy on their label for a while, and it is mired in politics right now because essentially the definition they proposed, basically no packaged processed foods meet that definition, which is kind of the right answer.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of the right answer.
But those industries have a lot of money and they would not be very happy about that. Like
Well,
go
yeah,
down the
but
cereal aisle and look at how many of them say heart healthy on them. They would not be allowed to say that anymore.
which is great. I don't think they should be able to say
I mean, we agree, but this comes back to the very top of the episode where we said saying these things and getting elected is easy.
that. Oh, yeah, well, for sure.
Implementing the change once the financial incentives get involved and the lobbyists get involved is a lot harder. You have keeping people
Yeah.
motivated enough to change a policy that the vast majority of well-funded lobbyists are going to oppose. That takes a significant political movement.
I mean, and then you get into conversations around like you could also better educate consumers, but then
Hmm.
soda companies sponsoring research study. We had that conversation on text about tobacco industries and buying. It's just insane. It boggles the mind. Shall we move on?
Yeah, I think we're making decent progress through our notes sheet too.
Hmm.
The next one's a spicy one.
Please.
Corporate capture of healthcare, nutrition, and research. All right, right, guys, that's it for this week. This conversation went a little bit long. We are breaking this conversation into 2 episodes. You will get the rest of our thoughts on the MAHA phenomenon next week, including a little bit of a dive into some of the specific personalities involved. See you then.
Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.